You are listening to the Practising the Art of Small Business podcast with Shannyn Merlo and Julie Parker. Join their conversation about business, leadership, and the self-awareness journey to greater success.
Hello, Julie. Welcome to episode 12 of Practising the Art of Small Business.
How are you, Shannyn?
I'm very well, thank you. Hello, listeners as well.
And
Julie,
watchers, viewers, I think they're called.
Welcome. If you aren't listening to us, if you are listening to us and not viewing us, and you would love to view on Julie and my faces while we talk, then you can actually access this episode and all of our past episodes and future episodes on our YouTube channel. And our YouTube channel is called Practising the Art of Small Business.
Surprisingly, yes.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. If you can't find the link, just go to the website, practisingtheartofsmallbusiness.com.
Our branding is pretty on point at the moment, Julie.
I think it's the consistency that people are going to like. But you know what, Shannyn? My problem is I really don't have time to talk to you today.
Well, I'm glad that you bring that up, Julie, because maybe today's podcast is really talking about time and not having time for us record, but for our listeners listen to the podcast. What do you think?
I think that is a tremendous topic because it's something that I've been living with for the past few hours. It's been highlighted to me how time has been a barrier for me. So I mentioned to you just earlier, and I'll mention it for our listeners and viewers now, Jordan Peterson, who wrote the 12 Rules to Life, or what is that the name of the book, 12 Rules to Life?
There's something about 12 and rules and life. So I think you're close.
And he has been a professor at universities for many, many years. And he initially designed this particular program, which I'll mention, for students. And what he did find was the students that moved through this process, more of them remained part of their courses through to completion than if they had not done this project. And he designed this project, I think, with another couple of professors. And it's called self-authoring, and you can get it through the website selfauthoring.com. It's only $29, something ridiculously small. And I thought, I wonder if this is going to be a helpful thing for my clients and the club members as a way of establishing goals and what you want to get out of your life. And in order for me to assess that, I thought I'll go through this process again. And as many of us have, we've gone down the process of establishing goals and a plan for our life many times over. And for some reason, the way this is displayed and carried out online, I am just loving it. And I'm sticking with this long process. You know, in essence, it doesn't just take half an hour. There's a few stages to it. And it's going to take me a number of days to get it completed because I can't just devote 2 full days to doing it, which is groovy and fine, that I'm really enjoying the process of it. But what it has allowed me to recognize, because one of the questions in this program is, what are your goals, of course, but what are your barriers to achieving this goal? Or what are your barriers to fulfilling the steps that's required in order to achieve the goal? And the first word that I type in every one of those boxes is time. And you've mentioned in the past that you think that I'm quite productive and my diary is all set out and I've got time for everything, but trying to introduce something new to that has made me recognize, well, I think I've still got more work to do.
Well, so as we do on our podcast, Julie, we're going to go all over the shop and go on swings and turns and roundabouts, because we're probably going to talk a little bit about structure and systems with regard to time, but we also need to think about time from the construct of our mental construct around time, as well as time as a concept, because I think that often we have a meaning associated with time and what a minute is or what an hour is. But Julie, as you would know, during times where you're either in flow, it's during those times where you get either a lot done or you lose yourself. And so time, it is not, yes, it is a fixed X number of seconds, X number of minutes, and we know what that looks like. But depending on what you're doing or where you're expending your energy, it can either be something that just extends for a really long period of time or shortens depending on what your experience of time is. So before we get into a system thinking around time, we also have an opportunity to think about time more broadly in terms of where we put our time and our energy and what the feeling is, and then what we believe around time. And I know what I just said was very kind of wishy-washy and a little bit esoterical, but this isn't our first podcast recording together, Julie, and I like to go here, so why not?
We knew what we were getting into.
yeah, listeners. And if this is your first time, you're either going to enjoy the journey or you're not. And if you're not, that's okay.
That's the whole free will thing. You don't have to enjoy it.
Yeah, so that's episode 10.
That was a couple of episodes ago. We talked about free will. Correct. People are free to dislike our podcast.
Correct.
Bizarre as it is. Not that I think that would be a common thought.
So, Julie, with time, and this self-authoring is on some level a bit of a system, but if our biggest barrier to time management is our belief around what time means to us, then how can we meaningfully change the way that we perceive time?
Tell more to this. Help me understand it further, where you're coming from.
Okay, well,
give you an example.
Give you an example. So one example of our perception of time is that I once said to a client of mine who was always frantic, always out of control, always crazy busy, and I'm sorry to use that language, but it was their language that they used. And I gave them a challenge, and this was early in my coaching days, and I just offered a challenge. I said, I would love for you to remove any language associated with being busy, out of control, not having enough time. All of that language is gone from your experience. It does not exist. And at our next coaching session, I said, how did you go? They said, oh my goodness, I have been so productive. I've had so much extra time to do things. I've been completely in control of everything. There's been a real shift. And so their perception of what they can do within the time that they had completely shifted as a result of the language that they were using. And interestingly enough, one of the other topics that I talked to Julie about potentially bringing in to today's podcast, I've just done. So our language...
You got your way after all.
So our language can have a perception of what we believe we have capacity to achieve within the time that we have. Do you agree or disagree, Julie?
Completely and utterly agree. I get exactly what you're talking about now. And the thing that came to my mind towards the end there was the minute I started, how I do my little mantras on my walks every day. One of my mantras was, I'm super productive, I'm super productive, I'm super productive. And I started that when I wasn't feeling super productive, but telling myself that constantly. And it's the Dr. Bruce Lipton, if you can't get into a space where you're learning a new belief before the age of 7, I'm not quite sure if you've noticed, but I'm way beyond the age of 7. And you can't go into a space of hypnosis where you can shift a belief instantly, then the next best thing you can do is repeat the affirmative thing over and over and over and over and over and over again. So on my daily walk, I pick something, and for a few days there it was, I'm super productive, I'm super productive, I'm super productive. And I just repeat it over and over again for half an hour, whatever it takes, that length of walk. And what I did notice when I started that, I started using my time more effectively. I would jump into tasks more quickly, and I would be ticking things off so quickly that I ended up dragging things from future days into my current day. to get done. And so what you're saying is the opposite is also true. If I say I don't have enough time for anything, it's going to take me longer to get through things. I am going to be dragging things from today into tomorrow because there just wasn't enough time. That our experience of time is what we tell ourselves it is. If there's not enough time, there won't be enough time. But if you're super productive, you're getting through your tasks like crazy. So I think changing your verbiage around that is a really great thing, but it's also something to reduce your stress around time as well. If you have got the verbiage of I'm super productive, there's plenty of time to get everything done, I can fit other things in my day when needed, it's going to create less stress in your life than there is no more time. Everything else is an add-on. I'm rushing through everything and I'm so exhausted by the end of every day.
Well, I guess part of that language or that verbiage that you use, Julie, is I love how you use that language of I'm gloriously, what do you say? I'm so thankful and I'm so gloriously happy that I have a full schedule. You know, you use language in a way that actually increases your joy around being, and I'm sorry to use the word, but busy, having things to do, having things in the diary, right?
Yeah. And part of that is one of the lessons that Charles has taught me with, you know, the benefits and drawbacks of every situation. So every situation that we come up against has equal number of benefits and drawbacks. And he uses that classic example of winning the lottery, that there are going to be obvious benefits to winning the lottery, but there's also going to be a whole bunch of drawbacks as well. All of a sudden, family and friends may come and start asking for loans. Maybe you'll develop a fear that you'll lose all this money. Maybe you will lose all the money. And then I've got to learn about investing and trying to hang on to the money and making it work for me so it's going to be there forever. So you start thinking about what the drawbacks would be to a clearly, obviously wonderful situation, and you start to recognize, yes, they are in equal measure. And so when we've got a lot of clients, when we've got not many clients, when we've got a full diary, a less than full diary, there are going to be benefits around all of that. And I'm a happier person when I start focusing on the benefits and recognizing that there's drawbacks, but embracing those, because I can't enjoy the benefits without experiencing the drawbacks. And so the drawbacks become less of a negative and more a vehicle that I can have those benefits delivered upon to me. So I think then you can start speaking about everything with gratitude. I'm gloriously busy. I'm wonderfully hectic. I've got so many things to fill my day. Isn't life grand?
I did actually remove the word busy from my vocabulary. So I just love it when people say, so how's things? You busy? And I'm like, no, I've got things, I've got things in the calendar.
Yeah.
One of the things that I wrote down as you were talking, Julie, and we discussed earlier before we started recording, was that we do tend to prioritize what is important to us. So much as we say that we don't have time, we do have time to do the things that we determine is most important. What are your thoughts on that one?
I agree. And I'd like to couple it possibly as well with, and small business owners out there will probably understand what I'm talking about, that we will prioritize some things that are most important to our business, but we'll also start doing the things at the start of the day that we just simply enjoy doing. I want to enjoy this hour, so I'm going to do that fun thing first, even though it may not be the most crucial thing to get completed during the day. Do you find that you do that a little bit as well?
Yeah, look, I'm do as I say, not as I do, Julie. I guess the thing is, we as humans, we're reward focused, and doing those things that are fun or that's easy to tick off does release that dopamine hit for us. So if we're struggling to find that motivation to start things off or to start the morning, what our brains on a conscious or unconscious level will do is try to give us a reward. And unless we've got that mindset of this really meaty, uncomfortable thing that I don't want to do is going to ultimately have a great reward, our brain is going to find other things to do that's going to give us a reward, which is why we might distract ourselves with Facebook or going to get a coffee or making a phone call to someone who's going to make us laugh, because that's going to give us the reward. So I agree that it's very easy to get distracted. I think it can also be very easy to be distracted when there's a sense of overwhelm. And I just shared with Julie before we started, I had a download session with my sister over the weekend. My sister's a business analyst, and I was like, if anyone can help me kind of prioritize, she loves running an agile project management system, and it was a little bit of overkill for me, but the process of getting things out of my head as a way of removing the overwhelm was very helpful. But at the same time, I've got to then set up some sort of system to remind myself that I've got this system here, and to do the things that are at the top of the list, not the things that are the fun things to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And, the process of reestablishing my goals through this self-authoring Jordan Peterson project, it has helped me remind myself of the importance of some of the goals. And what that leads to is the tasks that fill up my days, rather than looking at them and just doing the stuff that's really urgent, I've now reverted back to prioritizing them in terms of importance rather than urgency, because I'm reminded about what my end goal is. And so it's another example of the relevance of establishing some sort of goal or a series of goals and a plan to get there, because it does help you fill your days with the things that are important. And it reminds me of the Eisenhower matrix. I
literally just wrote that down just to prove the point that I'm not lying. And there it is
on her remarkable Eisenhower matrix.
There you go.
Love that remarkable pad, I tell you. And so for those that aren't aware of the Eisenhower matrix, it's a grid of 4 boxes. And the first box is not important, or it doesn't really matter which kind of, what order. I'm not quite sure which order it comes in, but anyways, you'll absolutely get the picture. Let's say box number 1 on the upper left-hand side is important and urgent. Box number 2, just to the right of it, is important and not urgent. Box number 3, which is under the first box, so on the lower left-hand side, is not important and urgent. And the lower right box is not urgent and not important. And it's always a wonderful thing to be always functioning from important but not urgent. Then you're giving yourself enough time to complete that important task without rushing it. And to everything that ends up being in that 4th quadrant, so not urgent and not important, that always ends up either being delegated away or not being done at all. And there's no huge, terrible consequence to that, because it was never really all that important in the first place.
That quadrant 1 or quadrant 4, whichever one it is, with not urgent, not important, that's often what we find ourselves doing, especially when we've got team members and we haven't set good boundaries around how we're managing our team. Because often I've found that, and I call them other people's monkeys, that you get other people throwing their monkey on your back, and this monkey is screeching at them, whatever the monkey is. It's a task, it's a thing they can't do. They then throw their monkey on your back, so that monkey's now screeching at you, but it was never your problem in the first place, but you've allowed that problem to become your problem. Then it gets caught in that it's not urgent it's it's not important and it's not urgent, but somehow someone else has made it feel like it's urgent, and therefore we're kind of running around, or actually not important and urgent. That's even worse. So the idea, I suppose, of thinking about these things is, what is the stuff that's actually taking my time, that is other people's urgency, that's not part of my priority list, and really removing those actions or delegating out or pushing back and saying, I'm not taking your monkey on. Let's talk about this, or let's deal with this another way. There are a couple of other things that I wanted to just highlight from what you said, Julie, if I may, and listeners, if I may. The Eisenhower matrix, you might be familiar with that from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's a classic one.
I just happen to have right on the bookshelf.
Have that there again, people. So this is Stephen Covey. If you haven't heard of this book, I don't wish to offend anyone, but Where have you been? It's one of the classics. And he does talk about this quite a bit. So important to stay in that important, not urgent quadrant of the Eisenhower matrix. That quadrant, I wonder what your thoughts are, Julie, whether the working on the business is that quadrant. We always know that we need to be working on the business. We know it's important, but because there's not a fire to put out, it just doesn't get prioritized. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. And I think when you do go through that process of establishing your goals and therefore establishing a plan, that then is the vehicle for working on the business. And when you start to recognize all the things within that plan that need to be done in order for you to achieve your business goals, that's where it becomes a higher priority for you to spend time working on the business. So it needs to be focused time, well-used time. That's your reward for spending that time on it, that you think, gosh, my behavior does change. My attitude does shift. We become more aligned as a team when we utilize these business sessions. We all feel like we're on the same page, working towards the same goals. And you get that reward from working on the business and utilizing sessions for that. And so therefore, I think you can raise it up as a priority. So when those sessions are coming up in your diary, you're pretty excited by them rather than seeing them as a possible waste of time because nothing really changes anyway.
Yeah. And it's just another thing to do. One of the things that I've been incorporating into a lot of the planning sessions I've done this year. So we're at the end of the start of the year. We're at the end of the start of the year. Wow. I apologize for anyone who's just.
That's true. I've never thought of it that way, but we are at the end of the start of the year. I won't be calling it the start of the year once we get into Feb.
Correct. We're just at the end of January. So you can't really say Happy New Year after the end of January. So we're after the start of the year. But what I've included in a lot of the stuff that I've incorporated with planning sessions with clients is why are we doing this, and really drilling into that bigger why. So even if it's, I need to work on the business, why is this important? Why should you prioritize this? And really drilling down to drill up into the highest possible reason that you can think of right now. And I was doing this with a client just before we started recording, and actually one of their whys was about money that they were putting into their wage or profitability so that they could pay off their mortgage. So all of the actions that we were taking in terms of marketing activity, signing new clients, profitability in the business, all related to them paying off their mortgage. And that why was actually really motivating for them. Now, not necessarily something that they can share with their team. And I'd certainly encourage a why consideration with regard to the business. But I wonder whether if you're struggling to, not you, Julie, but listeners and anyone else who's interested in taking this on board, if there's a disconnect with the working on the business, prioritizing time, taking a moment out, have a think about the highest intention of why are you doing this? Really, why are you doing this? So that those little actions all lead to achieving this bigger why.
Great. I love that. And certainly in the process I've just been through with the self-authoring, it does help you understand and extrapolate out that big why. What impact is it having on you, but also the people around you and maybe, the community around you, and then further and further afield than that. The other thing that it has reminded me of that I first experienced when Tony Robbins unleashed the power within, and Jordan Peterson has got it incorporated within his program of self-authoring as well. And I find this ridiculously motivating. It's traumatic, but ridiculously motivating. And what that is what happens, really feel within your soul, what happens if you don't achieve any of your goals? Write down what your life looks like. And as an example, just say the goal is to get fit. I mean, I would like to follow Charles's lead and do daily exercise of both strength and cardio and flexibility. That's 3 things, not just both, but flexibility as well. So I remain fit, I can go for a long walk. I can bend over. I don't have to walk with an aid right through to the day I drop, which was in Charles's world going to be about 120 years old. So I'll be a fit little 120-year-old, that's for sure. And I don't want to struggle with those sort of health conditions as I grow older. And so I just say, let's pretend that that's the goal. What's my life going to look like if I don't achieve that goal? I'm going to be, and I actually wrote this down. I'll read it to you. This is being vulnerable, isn't it? It's me. I will read it out and we'll see if I keep it all in. I'll just commit. I'm going to put ego to the side and keep it all in.
Good for you, Julie. Thanks for sharing that vulnerability.
Well, I feel safe with you, Shannyn. Let's see if I feel safe with everybody else as well. If it goes to air, I feel safe with everybody else as well. Anywho, this is my future to avoid, which I've developed. I wrote up through the self-authoring Jordan Peterson project. The future I'm avoiding, and one that would cause me immense pain, is one where I do not learn from lessons, so repeat the unhelpful behaviour and thoughts over and again, achieving zero progress and feeling continued discomfort, dissatisfaction, and start to blame the world for everything, feeling that nothing is my fault and that life is simply hard and difficult. Beating my head against a wall with my business, trying to make every little thing work, but never earning enough from it to have a sense of success and true happiness. Always feeling like I am not good enough to make it work and that I have been kidding myself to think that I do have what it takes to aspire to be better than the limited self I am. That my friends and family enjoy some of me but find other aspects irritating and non-virtuous. That others see me as not only flawed but not improving and set in my unhelpful ways. Then I get worse with time and people find it less and less enjoyable to be around me. I start drinking too much to numb all those thoughts and feelings. And then I don't think with any clarity and become further and further dumbed down. I then gain weight, and as I get older, my lack of fitness makes it difficult to move with any energy or ease. Charles puts up with me rather than my presence be a source of joy and happiness. He does not admire me, and I am a drag on him. I end up at the end of my life looking forward to it ending rather than excited for every new day. I feel disappointed, all too aware of the missed and lost opportunities. Is that sad or what? Is that traumatic or what? Wow. And so the motivation comes from, that is not going to be my future. There is no way I'm ever going to let that happen. So sometimes recognizing what goals and what their importance are is not just, it's in addition to what's the big why. One of the big whys is because that can never, ever be my future. And rather than just moving towards the pleasure of the goal, the achievement of the goal, you are running as fast as you can away from the consequence of not achieving any of them.
I really want to thank you for sharing that, Julie. And
I was a little bit close to tears, I have to say. It's like reading it out loud.
But do you know what? There was stuff that was resonating with me, and there's going to be stuff that resonates with others, where there's an awareness of occasionally being stuck, of not making good choices, of not prioritizing what we say is important, such as exercise, such as taking those steps forward. But it takes a really strong heart and mind to write that down and be prepared to sit in the awful uncomfortableness of that reality, of that potential reality, because often we'll want to avoid thinking about that. It's like, no, we're okay. And in the background, our unconscious mind is having those thoughts. Our unconscious mind is going, you're not good enough. But how often do we sit with that? I'm not good enough. No, I'm going to change. I am good enough. I am going to be different. I am different because I'm not listening to you, and I'm not going to let you, little voice, hold me back because this is the consequence of it. And so I think that what you've shared is really powerful and really profound. And I want to congratulate you and thank you for sharing that with us.
That is my pleasure. And I do encourage people to go down this path. As you say, I think we're so fearful of looking at the stuff that makes us feel fearful, that ends up giving it more power than what it deserves as well. And so really facing up to it, recognizing what you're moving away from, having it as shifting it from just fear and useless to being something that you are actively moving away from, in terms of your in terms of doing the important stuff every day to make sure that's not going to be your result. That's a way that we can use fear to our advantage, rather than having it as a little thing, as you say, in the back of your brain, just going, it's loud enough that it affects our behavior badly in an unhelpful way, but it's not loud enough for us to actually deal with it effectively.
So, Julie, conscious of time, conscious of what you've shared, how do we wrap this up, this podcast? I don't have time to listen to this podcast. What are the learnings? What are the learnings that you've gotten from this?
Well, the main one that I've got from it is, when you are working on the important stuff every day, you will get to the end of the day feeling like you have achieved enough during that day. And you only know what the important stuff in terms of your goals achievement is if you have gone down that path, established your goals and a plan of how to get there. So if you feel like you don't have enough time, my encouragement to you is jump onto this self-authoring thing. See if going through the process helps you clarify your goals and plan to achieve those goals in such a way that all of a sudden you, by default, are now utilising your time more effectively.
And I think if anyone's telling themselves, I don't have time to listen to this podcast, have a recollection that you're now at the end of this podcast and there was probably something worthwhile listening to. And so I guess part of that why would you continue to listen, not just listen to us, but you're at the end of the podcast, right? So there's something that you've gotten from it. What are you going to take away from it, and why are you going to take away from that? So really thinking about, like, why did I do that? Why did I continue to do that? Was it beneficial in terms of my longer plans and longer term priorities? Is it helping or hindering me? Or was it just a dopamine hit that I got and I feel good as a result? Because either way, it's kind of good, and it'll have people continuing to listen to our podcast.
That's right, which is what we want.
Hooray!
So if you are enjoying the podcast, please don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast catcher. I think that's the term that I'm supposed to be using.
It's a bit fancy.
That's a fancy word. Podcast catcher. Hard to say though. And do share it with your friends. And the more subscribers we have, the more happier we are. Until next time, Shannyn, I hope you find the time to get all your bits and pieces done.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, listeners. Ciao.